Well, hello, friends. I hope you're having a great day. Welcome to Tuesday's edition of Take 5. We're breaking down the message that I preached Sunday that was simply entitled, Finding Your Inner Child. We're pulling that title from Matthew chapter 18, where the disciples approached Jesus and said, "Who's the greatest in the kingdom of heaven?" And Jesus, knowing it was none of them, called a little child to him, set him in the midst of him, put him up on his knee right there, and said to those disciples, those grown men, those followers of Christ, he said, unless you are converted and become like a little child, you cannot enter the kingdom of heaven. Now, he's not saying that you can't go to heaven and enter into the eternal bliss and the joys of the Lord. He's not saying that. He's talking about God's way of doing things and doing great things in the kingdom. You cannot and will not do it unless you convert and become like a little child. Now, the strange scenario that we have already ascertained is this. As believers, we're commanded to be mature in our understanding of the scriptures, right? We're supposed to understand the word and be deep into the word. God expects us to continually grow in our knowledge of his word so that we can readily take on the image of Christ and fulfill what the Bible is instructing us to do, because it's through his word that we become more like him. However, when it comes to faith and attitude and character and humility and love and trust, all of these things say that we are to take the position of a little child. So we find there's some things that children have that we must never lose. And so that's why I entitled this thing, Finding Your Inner Child, because we need to go back and find that first form of faith. When you talk about, being mature in the word and then being like a child in faith and trust and love, it's what we call the dual nature of the believer. So that means we're mature men in understanding, but we take the position of a child when it comes to our faith and our trust. Now, Matthew and Mark, when you look at the synopsis of those two recordings of this passage, you'll find that both of them say that we can't enter into the kingdom of heaven or the kingdom of God unless we are converted to become like little children. Well, when you look at little children as it is defined in the original language, that means an infant that is in the immediate need of another person's care. So that's how we are to carry ourselves. Now notice this, we're supposed to be deep and rooted and grounded and mature in our understanding of the word. And then at the same time, we are to be like a child in that we realize we always need God and we can do nothing without him. Where our faith is to be like a child, our trust is to be like a child, our love, our worship, our respect is to be like a child. Again, when you say kingdom of heaven, we're not talking about the eternal bliss and the joys of glory. We're not talking about that. We're talking about the will, the purpose, the mind, and the authority of God that's imposed on the earth through followers of Jesus Christ. And then when he says that we are to be converted so that we can entertain that and be a part of that, that means that we are to go through a twist, a turnaround, a reverse, or I think the best word would be a reversion back to some things. Now, I know we don't like to hear a lot of preaching about going back to certain things, but this is one of those things that we definitely need to revert back to. Now, naturally, first of all, there has to be a spiritual conversion before there can be a reversion. But these men were already disciples of Christ. So this conversion is actually what we're saying. It is a reversion back to the first form of faith and attitude that these men had when they first became followers of Jesus Christ. Now, I want you to think about it for a minute. When these original 12 disciples were called, they left everything without hesitation to follow Jesus. Jesus walked by Matthew and said, "Come follow me." Matthew left everything there. He left his calculator, his computer, his iPad, his laptop. He left all his facts and figures and all his sheets. He left everything that was there. He left his pencils, his pens. He left everything that he could leave. He left it all, left his job, didn't say, "Hey, Lord, let me put in my sick leave and see if this works out." Or, "Hey, let me see if I've got enough time that I can take up." Or, "Hey, what about my 401k? I mean, I'm invested. I've got a government job. This is a good job. I mean, what about my insurance and benefit?" He didn't say anything. Jesus said, "Follow me." And the boy got up and went. Peter and James and John and the other disciples, all of them the same way. Peter got up, left his boat and his nets, probably the boat and the nets that his father had given him, had passed down to him as his heritage and legacy. And so these guys didn't have to know anything when Jesus first called them, because they had that childlike trust and faith. They didn't ask questions. They didn't ask for details. They just simply trusted and obeyed. And that's how God intended for them to stay, and for us as well. Weird thing was, in less than 3 years, these disciples that asked no questions, that started out with this childlike faith and did not have to know anything, they just trusted and obeyed. In less than 3 years, they began to question Jesus' motives. Remember when the lady came in and poured the perfume on his feet there? They're so smart now into church economics that they began to ask the question, why wasn't this perfume sold and used to give money to the poor? Like they were smarter than Jesus. Now, see the transition that they're making? If this would have been 3 years ago, they would have said nothing. But now that they've grown in understanding and they've left that childlike faith, trust, and awe, now they're questioning what Jesus does. 3 years ago, they weren't arguing with one another. Now they're striving for selfish ambitions, arguing, saying who's the greatest. 3 years ago, they trusted the Lord to leave everything. Now they fall into unbelief and lose faith in God's ability to do the impossible. 3 years ago, they did everything that the Lord commanded. Now they've already, in less than 3 years, begun to decrease the frequency of fasting and prayer to the extent that they tried to cast a demon out one time and couldn't do it. Asked the Lord, why couldn't we cast them out? And He said it only happens through fasting and prayer. 3 years ago, they did not care about details because they trusted as a child. Now that they've left that inner child behind, now they worry about details more than obedience and faith. And they've become so fearful that in the face of persecution, all of them run away and leave Jesus alone in the Garden of Gethsemane. No wonder Jesus said that they must be converted or have a reversion back to that first form of faith. You know, I remember growing up in church and going to Sunday school and hearing about all those awesome Bible stories and seeing it just lived out on those flannel graph boards, in our little Sunday school rooms. Moses and the Red Sea and David and Goliath and Samson and Jonah and the whale and the 3 Hebrews that were thrown into the fiery furnace and Jesus walking on the water and raising the dead. And when I was little, when I was young like that, it seemed so easy to believe and be inspired by those stories. Why has that changed with us? Why, as we grow older, do we become more cynical and more negative and more pessimistic? Why does our faith become more difficult? Is it because when we were young, we were more gullible? Or is it because we have had decades in our life now that's been cluttered up with bad influences, maybe some false teaching and even the harshness of life? And what I want to know in the middle of all of this is, how did we lose that childlike faith and optimism in God? And can we reclaim it? We're going to look at some things over the next 3 days that I believe is necessary for us to reclaim that childlike faith as we go on the journey to find our inner child. Hey, I've got to get out of here. It's been good being with you today. I look forward to being with you tomorrow on Wednesday's edition of Take 5. Till then, God bless you. Have a great day. Hey, trust the Lord, my friend. He will never fail you.